Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Second Party Podcast. Recently, I've been thinking a fair amount about the American dream and whether or not it's dead or it's still alive and well. This is something where my wife and I here kind of disagree on a bit, right?
I don't know.
Okay, do you think the American dream is alive and well, or do you think it's kind of dead?
I think it's absolutely still possible.
Okay, so I was right. I think we kind of disagree on this. Okay.
I mean, it's different than it was 100 years ago, obviously.
Okay, how do you think that it's different? Well, maybe I should ask first, what do you think of when you think of the American dream?
I think of people being able to go from having nothing to having plenty. And anybody, basically, being able to do that.
Okay. I agree that that's part of it. I don't think that that's all of it, but okay. Continue.
That was my answer.
Okay, that's your whole answer.
Well, I mean, there's probably more nuance to it, but in a short, concise response, that's what I would say.
Okay. So I'll maybe outline what I think the American dream is then. I think the American dream, I agree with you, is that anyone can come here, okay, and if they work hard and they put in the time, that they can achieve what we call the American dream, which is, in my opinion, like kind of an average, clearly livable house that they can own by the point that they retire. They can retire at 65 and continue living a life similar to what they were living before. They can have a couple of kids, have a couple of cars that are reasonable, and easily do that with a job that they're working hard and diligently and reliably at.
Well, it's like the land of opportunity, right?
Yeah,
anyone can come and have the opportunity to achieve that.
Yeah, but the other thing I'd say is, when I think of the American dream, I also think, yeah, you probably don't need both parents working. And yeah, you probably don't need a college degree. And I don't think that that's still possible now.
Oh, it's possible.
You think you can go out without a college degree and just like work diligently, not be top of your field, but just like work diligently with just one breadwinner and have average cars and an average house, no financial troubles, and retire at 65.
Absolutely.
Really?
Is it possible? Yes, of course.
Okay, so maybe here's the question then. So do you think that most people are living the American dream?
No, most people are up to their eyeballs in debt.
Okay. So
or living paycheck to paycheck.
So are you saying then that they're not living the American dream because they've made bad choices?
Yes.
Okay.
In America, this day and age, I understand there are struggles and there are things that make it more difficult than it maybe was like 60 years ago, whatever, because of housing prices and inflation and taxes and like the cost of everything going up, right? College is so expensive, houses are so expensive now. So yes, I'm not saying that it's as easy or that it hasn't gotten more difficult in certain ways, but absolutely it's still possible.
I don't think that it's... So when I say the American dream is possible, I'm saying a given set of inputs yields a given output. Not just that, oh, well, the given output is possible in principle. Like, yeah, of course it is. But that the standard set of inputs yields the standard set of outputs.
Okay, how often do you hear the stories about, a janitor who his whole life lived frugally, saved his money, put it in his 401k, and he retired, he became a millionaire. Like, most people who become millionaires are people who just make the smart everyday money decisions like that.
Yeah, so that was true for, I think, the generation that you're seeing starting to retire now. What I don't see as true is the generation of people, like let's maybe say millennials and Gen Z. I'm not seeing the same types of opportunities. So for instance, okay,
Well,
the rate of college degrees has substantially gone up, and as a result, many of the jobs that people who are retiring or who have achieved the American dream in the standard way before were doing previously didn't require a degree, and now they do. I think for
yeah,
no
yeah,
conceivable reason. But now you've removed a bunch of jobs that like otherwise would have been achievable with the American dream, and you're saying like, well, now those are off the table. That's one thing. The other thing is housing costs are
yeah,
up radically even when
yes,
you control for average salary and inflation.
yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes.
And by the way, like, yes, I understand that you can go, well, you can achieve the American dream if you like go to this specific place. But like I said before, it's a given set of inputs for a given set of outputs. Like people used to live in major metropolitan areas, working standard everyday jobs, and they weren't in debt up to their eyeballs. Now, if you can do that, you're in debt up to your eyeballs.
Yeah, did people used to have payday lenders and credit card companies that charged 15% APR and afterpay so you could finance your sweater that you want?
No, but I'm saying even the standard things are not achievable in the same way that they were before.
What standard things?
If you look at a house of X amount of square feet, with X amount of bedrooms, with X amount of bathrooms, that's X years old at the point that we're valuing it, that it costs more relative
Yes.
to inflation,
Yes.
relative to salaries today,
Yes.
than it did in the 60s.
Yes, I've conceded that. Yes.
Yeah, okay. And
That doesn't mean the American dream is not possible anymore.
but I'm saying in the same way. So the same teacher salary
It's different.
that
Yes,
could
you're
have
right. Yes, you're right. It's different. The dynamics have shifted for sure. And the strategy you'd have to employ has definitely shifted. But the American dream was never about one specific strategy. It was about, could someone come with nothing? Could anyone with nothing but, a good work ethic come with nothing and achieve having?
Okay, so I'm gonna push back on you a bit there.
That's how I'm defining the American dream.
So in the Bible, you've got Joseph, who's sold into slavery by his brothers, right?
Yes.
Okay, and he ends up being second in command to the king.
Yes.
Okay. Oh well, clearly it's possible in that society to rise from nothing, a slave, to a very high prestigious position,
Yeah,
like
but
basically next to the
could
king.
anyone have done that? No.
What do you mean by could anyone have done that?
Could anyone have been in Joseph's position and do that? No, it was like the hand of God was working in that situation. It was a very divinely oriented type of thing. The point with the American dream is that we have a free market, open economy, and a society structured around individual rights and freedoms and welcomes anybody, right? A melting pot of cultures. Anybody can come and achieve success.
Okay, but then what I would push back on you with there is you've broadened the definition of American dream to the point where it's no longer American. Like what you've said was and is achievable in the same way in like the UK. If you're just saying, "Oh, well, it's possible in principle," like there's nothing
Okay.
necessarily standing in your way. Like that's the same thing in the UK or in France or in Germany or plenty of other places.
Okay,
What was
why don't
unique about America?
yeah, so why don't you tell me what you mean when you say American Dream then? How do you think about it? Cuz maybe I'm just thinking about it very much differently.
What to me, what was unique about the American dream, when I look back and I look at whether it's economics or what I heard from people or what have you, okay? Like you could go and get like an average everyday type of job, right? Not something super niche, not something that required a special skill, okay? Something where it's pretty standard, okay? You're a restaurant manager, you work your way up to a restaurant manager. You are a mechanic. You go into the military, okay? Standard types of jobs like this. You're a policeman, maybe a school teacher, okay? And you can support a family, let's say of 4 or 5, off of one person's income, and you can buy a modest house. So actually, the house thing is less than what maybe the average house nowadays is. Okay? And you can do that in basically any American city. And you can do that with very minimal debt, with the exception being your house.
And you couldn't do that in, say, the UK?
My understanding is that no, that it's not, that was not possible in the same way, no.
Well, part of it
Namely
was
the house and land portion.
yeah, so part of it I think is that America was so like new as a world power. Like America's a kind of a baby country
Comparatively
somewhat
speaking, yeah.
compared to a lot of the other western developed countries. So I think part of it was that there was so much like untapped land, so much booming economy and space.
So, yes, that's part of it, but what I would probably argue is that the American dream, from the very beginning, as people understood it, was not going to be perpetually possible. Okay, and the reason being, I think the country as a whole was running a deficit, both literally and on like kind of a macro level. Okay, at that point in time, yes, you're right, you've got a booming economy and all of these things. Okay, but I think a lot of where that wealth is coming from is by not addressing things and pushing them down the line. So it would be like if today I started just spending money out the wazoo and buying a bunch of stuff. You'd look at it and you go, oh, well, like, wow, he must be making a ton of money right now. That's crazy. Let me get in on that. But actually, I'm running up a massive deficit that comes down the line. And the difference is that instead of it being me and it comes down the line in 2 years, it's one generation and then multiple generations later.
Okay. Let me read from the Wikipedia page for the American Dream.
Okay.
It says the American Dream is the national ethos of the United States. Is that how you say that word? Ethos?
Yeah.
A set of ideals including representative democracy, rights, liberty, and equality, in which freedom is interpreted as the opportunity for individual prosperity and success, as well as upward social mobility for oneself and their children, achieved through hard work in a capitalist society with few barriers. The term American Dream was coined by James Adams in 1931, saying that life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement, regardless of social class or circumstances of birth. So that is definitely still possible.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yes.
I'm.
Why are people still flooding to America?
Well, wait. So, I guess 2 things can be true. Okay. Yeah, sure. That definition, I agree. It's still alive and well. I don't think that's all that people mean when they use the term colloquially.
Okay,
at least
so
nowadays.
That's why I was saying you need to go back and define what you mean.
Well, that's why I have.
Okay.
I'm saying there's a set of inputs that yield a set of outputs, and I'm saying that same set of inputs,
which consists of the typical job, typical house,
one income,
income.
Yep,
most of
that
it.
no longer yields the typical
You're
output.
saying now you have to put more input in to receive the same output.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
quite possibly. I bet that's true.
and I think that's why you have people of the millennial or uh, like Gen Z generations, and they sit here and they go like, yeah, this feels like it's rigged against us. It feels like, oh yeah, all these people who
Right.
just tell us like, oh, well, go work hard and this will happen. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, you're not
Yes.
playing by the same rules. It's not the same space. Like you said, do X and get Y, and it's like I'm doing X and I'm getting half Y.
Yes. And that's why I'm saying the equation has definitely shifted. The dynamic
Sure,
of the picture has changed. Absolutely.
I think that's what more people mean when they say like, oh, the American dream or the American dream is a sham or it's not possible for me. I think that's what people mean. They're looking at the equation. It's not that, oh, well, yes, of course it's still alive. Like somebody can still become a multi-millionaire or a billionaire by starting My Pillow or Tesla. Like, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course.
I guess I don't know why you'd ever assume that that equation could stay exactly the same indefinitely throughout history
No,
because resources are limited, economies change, populations change and grow. Of course the equation is going to shift a bit.
yeah,
That's why I say like I don't define it that way. I define it as are there still the freedoms, the abilities, opportunities, the economy needed that's in place to go from having nothing and gaining in social status and making a life for yourself? And I say yes, absolutely.
yeah. So I definitely think that that's the case. I guess I just don't necessarily think that's what most people mean when they say the American dream.
Maybe not.
I think what they mean is a set of inputs and a set of outputs. But in any case, like whether we're talking about terms, I guess I look at it and the set of inputs, set of outputs yields something. Let's call that the 1960s American dream, okay? Where that set of inputs yielded that set of outputs, okay? I think so much of the reason that you have the okay boomer meme and a lot of lack of respect for elders nowadays, at least in part, is because many older people assume that that 1960s American dream is still feasible. And I think a lot of millennials and Gen Z feel disenfranchised because that's not achievable and they feel cheated.
Or, yeah, if you get to, 30 and you can't afford to buy a house yet, and the
Yeah,
boomers are like, oh, well, you're just not working hard enough and whatever. And
yeah,
it's like, well, just because you had a house when you were 21 in 1953,
yeah.
like,
Well, you see those memes where it's like a couple from, yeah, like the 60s. And they're like, oh, yeah, like 25, have a house, have two kids, have a car, right? And then you've got like the millennial person. And they're like, oh, I've finally got an apartment outside of my parents' house at 25. Like, I think that differential
yeah.
is why a lot of these people
I
feel
mean,
disenfranchised and why they're that's why you have these young people wanting to like tear down the system.
yes, it is. And there are a lot of things that go into that. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
there's also a de-emphasis on the family. People are getting married way later in life. Now, the idea is you don't settle down until you're late 20s, 30.
Okay, yeah, but like I think with that you have to ask, is this a chicken or the egg problem?
I don't know. It's all wrapped up together,
Cuz
I'm sure.
if you sit here and you're like, yeah, I can't afford to go buy a house and I'm barely able to afford an apartment with 5 roommates. Well, like yeah, it's tough to think about kids when you're in that situation, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some of both, right? Cuz there
Yeah.
are the people who like they can settle down. They're fine. But it's they want their 20s to have fun, to party, to, you only live once.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
it's not so cut and dry as just, one clear reason why or a handful of reasons. it's a very convoluted situation. I'm sure that plays a role in it. But as a whole, people are getting married later. And whether that's a result of the economic differences or whether that's a cause of part of the economic differences in America, the reality is they're at least correlated.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking like, okay, so my grandpa started his apprenticeship at 16, okay? And he was off doing his own thing at like late 17, early 18 years old.
In
Okay?
America? Or
Yeah.
not in America? Yeah.
Not in America,
Okay.
but then moved over here.
Yeah.
Okay? But he's entering his career at 18. Okay? Nowadays, many of these same careers
Yeah.
require a 4-year college degree. Okay, so now you're entering your career, you're entering the job force 4 years later. Oh, and by the way, you're probably saddled with debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine how you'd sit here and you'd be like, how am I supposed to support a family when I'm not, when I have no means of obtaining resources for said family. Now, before you went, oh, yeah, well, I've been in my career for 4 years. I'm 22. I'm well established. I'm making good money. Great. Well, that same 4 years out isn't 22 any longer.
Yeah.
It's 26. Oh, and by the way, we still haven't addressed the debt. So let's say you pay off your debt in 2 years. Well, now you're 28, and it's like there's your differential.
Yeah. I'm sure that plays a role in it, yeah. I mean, we also like do you think people in the 1950s were getting degrees in theatrical feminism? Like,
Yeah, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not trying to remove a bunch of personal choice here. And yeah, I agree that there are plenty of people who don't take things seriously and they just go and party.
and there are people who just don't know how to manage money either.
Yeah, of
Like
course,
they
of
make
course.
enough money. You watch all these CNBC make it videos on YouTube and it's like, "Oh, I make $150,000 as a 26-year-old and I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I just can't figure out why I can't save money." And it's like, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm not trying to remove that onus from people, and I'm not saying this out of like personal frustration. Like we have our own home, we're very blessed, we have great degrees. Okay, this isn't like seriously affecting me. I'm able to live the life that I want, but I do look around and like I it's hard not to have compassion on people when you sit here and maybe it's an unreasonable assumption, but many people assume that, yeah, my life is going to be as good or better than my parents, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
the environment that I'm expecting to go into. And then you start getting into the workforce and it starts feeling like, at least comparatively speaking, like the deck is rigged against you.
Yeah, I
Like there
I
aren't
get
those
it. I get it.
options.
I'm not trying to be too hardball and like I don't have compassion for, people who it definitely is harder than
Hmm.
it probably used to be. And the frustration of older generations just being like, "Oh, you're lazy, you're not working hard enough because you're not exactly where I was when I was your age." And it's like, well,
Hmm.
times change. America is not the
Yeah.
same as it was 50 years ago. Our economy is not the same as it was 50 years ago. Some things are better, some things
Hmm.
are probably worse, but it's different. So you can't compare apples to apples, millennials
Hmm.
and Gen Zers of today to the boomers of 60 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand like having certain judgments placed on a whole generation because the circumstances outside of their control are just different,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like the boomers screwed up a lot of things in the American economy too.
That's one hell of an understatement, but yes.
That generation and a lot of the economic policy that came out of that generation
Yeah.
are kind of abominable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely do understand that, and I have I have friends, like people I grew up with, who are in their upper 20s, and it's just with their situation and what they're doing in life, it's like very difficult to try and buy a house. And they have a
Yeah.
kid,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just,
Well, they
it's
both
so
work like
hard.
reasonable jobs.
How do you, you know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
like
Who I'm
okay,
referring
let's
to.
give an
Okay.
example. Okay, so like he works for.
I don't really want to go into like a bunch of specifics here. I just kind of want to be vague.
Okay, fine. We've
But
got two people with like what I would consider like average jobs.
right,
Okay, and they've got one
right.
kid.
Both very respectable, yeah,
Okay, and they're
good
struggling to
jobs.
purchase a house. Now I want to contrast that with, and I understand it's an anecdote, but okay, my grandparents. Okay, they had my dad, and my grandma was 20. My grandma worked for the city,
Hmm.
just standard type of city actuarial type job. Okay, and my grandpa was a manager at a grocery store. Okay,
Yep, very normal
again,
working class.
very
Yeah.
normal types of jobs. Okay, they went out, they bought a house, they had two cars, and they had a boat. Okay, and they
Were
did
they
this
beyond their means?
um at the time slightly, like compared to other people. Nowadays it'd probably be pretty average. So you've got a pretty good control for like debt to income ratio.
Okay.
Okay, and they were early 20s when they were able to do this. The people we're talking about,
Yeah.
how old are they?
We'll say they're upper 20s.
Okay, upper
Yeah.
20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Okay,
Upper 20s. But yeah.
we're like 8 years different.
Yeah. And
It's
right,
just
and
it's a totally different ball game.
that's what I'm saying, like I understand frustrations there, and I'm not saying that it's exactly the same. I tend to lean more on the side of like I'm not going to personally use things as an excuse for things. Like even today, living in America, like you are living in one of the best places and times
Of
throughout all of
course,
human
I
history that
agree.
you possibly can.
Yep.
So I do have sympathy. There comes a point though where I say if you're born in America in this generation, you're automatically one of the best off of all humans throughout all of
I
history.
completely agree.
So I'm I also take an issue with the extreme, and this is also a problem with a lot of younger generations, a lot of people, not all of them, but just overly whining
Hmm.
and making
Yeah.
excuses. And I take a problem with that too. I really don't have
Yeah.
tolerance for that.
Yeah, I agree. I guess so on like the personal level. Yeah, I sit here and go like who cares about the macroeconomic situation? Like your job is to make the best decisions for you next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, however many years down the line. Like that's what you need to do. That onus is on you. But when you start looking at like a macro scale, right, beyond the individual, you do start asking questions like, okay, what is the income to average home value differential here? What's that ratio look like? Okay, what's the average new car price or what's the reasonable low end car price relative to salary? Like and it's there that I think you start to see some of the more insidious pieces, some of the more difficult pieces.
Yeah. And I understand that. I I guess maybe the way I'd say it is if, the boomers when they were our age, they were like up 100 points, okay? And our generation now on an absolute up 100 points like on an absolute scale. If
Sure.
we have some
Yeah, yeah.
absolute scale here of all human history,
Hmm.
they're like plus 100, okay?
Yeah.
And our generation today, we're like plus 95. Okay. And yeah, if you're plus 95 and you got the plus 100 people, being like, you lazy, you don't have exactly what I had when I was your age because you're lazy, you're not working hard. Yeah, I'd have some frustration and be annoyed at that generation too. At the same time, I also sit here and I'm like, I'm up 95 points on
Yeah,
average
yes.
over the course of human
Yeah.
history. Like, this is unprecedented. I have, at the same time, I can't really be that upset about that.
Yeah, and look, I definitely agree. I don't know that the differential is 5%, but the general sentiment,
Whatever. I don't know the exact numbers, but
yeah, the general sentiment I definitely agree with, and I'm in no way saying that people should be ungrateful, but I do think that it's something that should at least be investigated. And I'm not even saying that you should expect equal or better than what your parents had. Like, for most of human history, that wasn't the case, right? You were hoping for the same. You're hoping there wasn't like a massive drought that seriously affects you that your parents didn't have to experience or something like that. Okay. But I do think that when you look at macroeconomic trends and things like that, you garner more insight and a better understanding of why some of these younger generations feel frustrated, feel disenfranchised, feel cheated, whether rightfully so or not.
yeah. Yeah.
And I want to reiterate, this is not like something that personally affects me. Like, if anything, I think this probably serves to benefit us because sometimes things are on like a relative basis. And I think one of the things that happens when you feel like the deck is stacked against you, in a general sense, is people tend to try less, right? If you know that you're not playing a fair game, or if you think that you're not playing a fair game, which is what some people do, you don't play with the same tenacity that you otherwise would. And I think as a result, that's why you kind of see the millennial and Gen Z generations kind of polarize, right? You've got really hardworking people who just say, you know what, I'm just going to grind and grind and grind, and I'm going to be the best that I possibly can. And then you've got, like you kind of mentioned, the people who are whining and just saying, oh, the world's against me. It's all my situations. I had no control. So from that aspect, I think it's possible that we even benefit from this because it's easier to stand out when there's less competition. So I guess to answer our original question, is the American dream dead? I think the answer is definitionally no. You definitely have tons of opportunities, but the deal that people had in the 60s isn't the same deal that you're offered nowadays. And on your individual basis, that doesn't need to matter. You can go out and you can still do it.
Might not be dead, but perhaps it's a little bit wounded.
Yeah, I think macro level, a little bit tough, maybe on life support a little bit, but in your personal life, still totally possible. And you should go out there and you should work as hard as possible.
Just don't have a victim mindset. Whatever you do, don't do that.
That's true. I definitely agree. Take accountability, take responsibility, and you can do it. Well, with that, it's getting late. But recently, I've heard a couple of phrases from those around me that I think are kind of interesting. I'm thinking about incorporating them into my kind of day-to-day use of language. The first one, somebody was describing a variety of different options, and they described those options saying that there was a charcuterie board worth of options, kind of illustrating the variety and different types and combinations of things that we could choose. And I don't know, I just kind of like that phrasing. And then the other one was they described someone who was being particularly dumb as a tier 3 idiot, which kind of begs the question, what are the tiers? Is tier 3 at the top? Is it the bottom? But you don't really want to ask because maybe that makes you seem even more idiotic. But I kind of like those couple of phrases. I might incorporate them into my day-to-day use. If there are any phrases like that that you have a particular affinity towards, feel free to send them over to us. I'd love to hear some of them at secondpartypodcast@gmail.com. With that, it's getting late. Thank you again for listening. Have a good night.